Today's podcast is sponsored by Datadog, a monitoring platform for cloud-scale infrastructure and applications. Datadog provides dashboarding, alerting, application performance monitoring, and log management in one tightly integrated platform so you can get end-to-end visibility quickly. And it integrates with more than 350 technologies, including AWS, PostgreSQL, Kubernetes, and Docker. You can visualize key metrics, set alerts to identify anomalies, and collaborate with your team to troubleshoot and fix issues fast. Try it yourself by starting a free 14-day trial today. Listeners of this podcast will also receive a free Datadog t-shirt. Visit bit.ly.com/DatadogShirt. That's bit.ly.com/DatadogShirt to get started. Hi, this is Scott Hansel, and this is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm talking with Dr. Saleema Amershi from Microsoft Research. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am pretty excited to talk to you because I am actually got some guidelines for human-AI interactions open in my browser here, and I've been reading this paper that you and your team worked on, and there was a Medium post, and I guess this was presented at a conference recently?
Yes, at the CHI conference, which is our a conference on human-computer interaction. Mm-hmm. This was recently presented there a couple of weeks ago in Glasgow.
And CHI is C-H-I?
Yes.
Computer-Human Interaction?
It's it's our human-computer interaction conference. I think the original acronym is Computing Factors for Human Interaction.
That doesn't seem like it's very human-friendly as an acronym.
Yeah. It's an old... Now I feel like you got me already. Human factors and computing systems. Somehow it turned into CHI.
Yeah, I think it's more important that you be an expert on machine learning and not obscure acronyms of computer conferences. It's totally cool. But this paper here, and we'll have links up in the show notes to both the blog and the PDF and the paper. It's in multiple different formats. It's basically, I wouldn't say commandments, it's guidelines. It's 18 general rules. I don't know why it's 18. About if you're developing an interaction where a human and an AI are going to work together on something, what are the guidelines? Why did we need guidelines?
Oh, so many reasons. We found when we were working with our product teams were struggling to design for AI. And that's partly because AI systems are different than traditional computing systems. They're probabilistic, they make errors. And so a lot of our sort of established design principles don't necessarily apply. And at the same time, we had a lot of knowledge about how to design for AI, but a lot of the guidance that we knew about was presented at all different levels, very high level, like establish trust. But, how do you actually do that, to really low level, like here's how you design for this specific scenario. But we needed something sort of in the middle that could help our design practitioners create new interfaces and new interaction techniques.
When you say that our existing guidelines don't apply, is it because they are incorrect guidelines or because they simply don't exist because this is a new world that we're entering?
They exist, and they're not incorrect. In fact, we think of the human-AI interaction guidelines as complementary to traditional guidelines. It's just that there are some characteristics of AI systems that make it challenging to adhere to traditional guidelines. So, for example, a traditional user experience guideline is to make our interfaces consistent and predictable. But AI systems are probabilistic. They operate under uncertainty. And so that means that they might behave differently in subtly different contexts, or they might behave differently after a model updates. And so that unpredictability can make it hard for end users to understand how to interact and use an AI system effectively. So really, we need sort of new guidelines to deal with those sort of properties of AI systems that don't exist with traditional computing.
I feel like there are people who are somewhat technical, like myself, and then somewhat non-technical, like my spouse. the more non-technical people are, they seem to ascribe intent to an AI.
Mm-hmm.
If it does something unexpected, if it makes a mistake, or if it, recently we were doing a thing with a competitive photos album, and it identified two people as being the same person.
Right.
And they're not the same person. They're not even the same gender. They're not even close to the same person.
Mm-hmm.
And someone said, "Well, that's that AI is racist."
Right.
I was like, "Whoa! Like, I mean, yeah, there's all like that's such a conversation right there. Like you just ascribed intent to this thing, and there's 50 reasons why it still might be racist, but why that thing could have happened. But then you don't want to, as a technical person, actually, the person that you're hanging out with at Thanksgiving dinner who now says that this AI is racist and they don't want to use the photo album anymore."
Yes. I definitely don't think companies are trying to create racist AIs. I think that's sort of a product of how AIs are built. They're based on data that's collected, and it's hard to get really diverse data sets. Just collecting data is very difficult. And so part of what happens is that when you don't have really diverse, broad data sets, you can get these properties of AI sort of behaving inappropriately for certain scenarios. And that's where the problems occur. And I think where the guidelines can help is in recognizing that AIs will make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I think it's very rare that an AI will be perfect, and we need to sort of stop thinking about them as trying to be perfect and recognize that they will make mistakes, and then give users tools to mitigate those mistakes when they happen.
Exactly. And that brings us to the first two rules of your guidelines for human AI interaction. Make it clear what the system can do,
right,
and make it clear how well it can do what it does. And honestly, we're only 2 rules in, and I don't think I've ever seen anything ever do that in my interaction with AI, whether it be the Photos app.
Mm-hmm.
It's never like, "Hi, welcome to the Photos app. We're probably going to think that your aunt is your dog and that your dog is your neighbor. And we're sorry, and click here when that happens." That's never happened to me.
Yes. I think there are some products that do this, but we're still learning. Like, there's many ways you can implement any of these guidelines. So some ways that I've seen this being done are so for the first guideline, making clear what the system can do. Some of our applications will give examples of what it can handle. So Cortana, for example, can suggest, here are some of the commands that I understand, right? That can give the user some understanding of what the AI can do well. But there are other ways that we might implement that guideline. And I think that's where we need new research, or like what are the multiple different ways that we can possibly implement that and any other guideline.
You say new research. Forgive me, because I'm not a researcher. I'm a more of a dev. What is the difference between a researcher and someone just coming up with these guidelines on their own? Like, why are your 18 guidelines better than one that I might just make up?
So ours are really a synthesis of AI design guidance that was coming out of the community for the past 20 years. So, I wouldn't even say, it's not like we made these up. We wanted to consolidate all sort of the guidance that was coming out of both like the practitioner community as well as the research community. And part of the issue was that a lot of guidance was being produced, but it was very scattered and it was hard to find. Guidance was presented at different altitudes. And so even though we sort of have a lot of knowledge about how to design human AI interaction, we were seeing a lot of like sort of redundancy and people trying to figure out the same things that we sort of discovered sometimes many years ago. And so really this is like a consolidation of all of that. And in the process of consolidating, we also iterated on the guidelines multiple times and validated them so we could ensure that they were clear and that they were applicable to a broad range of AI products.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's sort of the difference. I think a lot of the guidance that's coming out are sort of hypotheses that people have that maybe were only tested in one or two scenarios. These we know are relevant to a wide range of scenarios. So in that sense, they're trustworthy.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that there's nothing, like I thought when I was reading this, it was going to be application specific. And then I got halfway through and then I thought it'd be Alexa or Cortana specific or a voice assistant, but it's not. It's anything. It could be AI in a GPS app. It could be AI where something interrupts you. It could be just a dialog box that pops up. These are guidelines that are really about the interaction, but not specific to the interaction model.
Yes, yeah. And we were intentional about that. We wanted them to be broadly applicable to a range of scenarios. And so in our process of consolidating, we actually collected over 150 design recommendations about AI. So there is a lot of guidance around this. But we filtered out guidance that was very specific to particular applications because we wanted a set that could apply to a range of them. So that's how we came up with these. But we imagined that there could be additional application specific guidance that also might help in certain scenarios. For bots, for example, you might need additional guidance to support that specific scenario.
I see. So someone could theoretically take these and go off and make the best guidance for music recommenders or for e-commerce systems that are a more specific version of this with examples.
Yeah, I believe you could. I would just caution against starting from scratch. Like I would think about like, what do you need to do for a music recommender and go back to these and other guidance available and see if they're covered in this. Because I think part of, what we want to do is we want to accelerate our progress in how to design human AI interaction. And I think creating clarity about what do we know already can help. And that also can help us know what we don't know so that we can create guidance in that specific, gap in our knowledge.
And you went and you validated these guidelines. So when you say research, you're talking about multiple rounds of validation with both human-computer interaction experts, UX people, basically until those experts agreed that these are clear and specific and of high quality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We had 49 user experience practitioners from across Microsoft. We had them, we trained them about the guidelines. We had them test about 20 different products. And, they gave us feedback. They gave us examples. So we actually collected like over 700 examples of how to apply the guidelines. And those itself actually are really valuable just because they make it concrete. Like how do you make clear what the system can do? How do you support efficient invocation? We found that the examples themselves can really help practitioners understand how to implement these.
Yeah, even the paper's only, the one I'm reading is only 20 pages long, and it's definitely worth reading, and people should check it out. I'll make sure to have a link in the show notes. One of the things that I appreciated the most about this, and I don't spend a whole lot of time reading, papers of this kind of, academic or erudite kind of style, but I found it really useful because it was organized temporally. Like they're not just in order, like you just didn't number them. You've got initially when you start interacting with an AI, then during the interaction, when the interaction goes wrong, and then as you build a relationship, for lack of a better word, with the AI. In ordering them in that way, it felt really natural for me as I would go out and kind of think about how my applications behave.
Great. Yeah. We ended up with 18 of them at the end, and, it was a lot to digest. And so I would call these rough groupings to sort of make it more digestible. But in some sense, the when wrong category, that happens during interaction as well. But at least this way, it can make them somewhat memorable and help our practitioners understand that, hey, there are these different stages of people interacting with our AI systems, and we have to sort of design for all of them.
Hey friends, as a software engineer, chances are you've crossed paths with MongoDB at some point. whether you're building an app for millions of users or just figuring out your side hustle. As the most popular non-relational database, MongoDB is intuitive and incredibly easy for development teams to use. Now, with MongoDB Atlas, you can take advantage of MongoDB's flexible document data model as a fully automated cloud service. MongoDB Atlas handles all the costly database operations and admin tasks that you'd rather not spend time on, like security, high availability, data recovery, monitoring, and elastic scaling. Try MongoDB Atlas for free today. Visit mongodb.com/cloud. That's mongodb.com/cloud to learn more. One of the things that I thought was interesting was match relevant social norms. That's number 5. Does Cortana or Siri or Alexa behave very different? I've never heard it in another language or in another country. Are there social norms about how I'm supposed to interact with I don't know if I think of Alexa as my butler or my secretary or my man Friday. Like, I'm not sure who this person is or what my social norms is. And I wonder if Alexa in Japan is very different than Cortana in China.
That is a great question. I'm not, and I don't know the answer. I think there are cultural differences that need to be taken into consideration. And in fact, this was one of the hardest guidelines for our practitioners to test. It depends on who your target users are, right. And whether you're trying to appeal to a specific user or a broad range of users. But even, just like think about like the voice, are you using a male or female voice? Is that appropriate for the cultural context? And, giving people choices about like changing the voice. What is another thing that we've seen as an example of how to match relevant social norms. It's not just like making Alexa or Cortana talk in one voice, allowing people to change that so it can better match their cultural norms.
Mm-hmm. And it also affects kind of our cultural norms. My wife was telling me just a couple of days ago that she didn't understand why Alexa was a woman, and if that was kind of getting to the women as secretary or assistant thing. And it's like, it's 2019. Here we have these amazing AIs that are ever present, and we can always ask them questions, but it happens to be a woman's voice. Could it be gender neutral and a non-gender specific voice? Is there a such thing? Right.
Yes, and I think those are questions we want answered. Some of what when we studied these, we had our participants give us examples of how they were being applied or violated, but we still don't really know what is the best way to achieve any of the guidelines. Like I said, there are multiple ways to achieve it, and I think that sort of goes back to what is a research question that we can, try to address, like what are research questions that these guidelines reveal? And one of them is that, like what are good ways of implementing how to match relevant social norms, such that people are happy and find that their AIs are intuitive and responsible and ethical.
Yeah, and how would you test that? And if you tested it now, or then in 5 years, or in 10 years, would the tests change? I mean, these AIs and our interactions with them, how I would interact with an Alexa today would be different than how one of the characters on Mad Men would interact with their theoretical AI in the past.
Right. And I think one of the ways that we can actually try to test for these, particularly that guideline and mitigating social biases, is to get a diverse set of testers. So one example that comes to mind that came out of our study was we had a couple of participants testing navigation systems, and one of the participants said, hey, this navigation system, it can't be biased. There's nothing it can do that's biasing. Whereas another participant said, hey, this navigation system assumes that I'm a healthy individual when it's giving me walking times to get to where I'm going. And I thought that was really interesting because, it demonstrates that having a diverse set of people helps to reveal when there are biases in a system or when an AI is violating social norms. It's hard for people to sort of assess an AI system for cultures and social contexts that they're not part of. And so diverse sets of testers can help there.
That is a really good one. I like to think of myself as, at the very least, waking up, and I would not have even thought about that. And now I'm going to think about it every time I go to a GPS and it says, yeah, you can walk that in 10 minutes. Because if you're in a wheelchair, I don't even know if there's stairs or if the GPS knows that there's stairs. I was making my way through a subway system in Europe recently, and I was working at a pretty quick pace. I was walking pretty fast, but even with my bags, I missed a couple of trains. If you could, and you could solve that by going and putting a weighting, like I walk half speed or I have a walker or whatever. And you could improve the experience for everyone, not just people who are differently abled.
Exactly.
One of the other ones that I really liked was this: make it clear why the system did what it did. I can't remember the time when my GPS told me why it picked the fastest route. It just told me, go this way.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. In our studies, that was actually one of the guidelines that was probably violated the most, in the sense that, so when I say violation, I mean people or participants thought it should apply, but it wasn't enabled in the systems that they were testing. And I think part of the reason for that is that we just don't know how to do this very well yet. AI systems are complex, and they're hard to describe. And that's why there's like a whole communities now around interpretable AI and machine learning, in order to come up with ways of explaining these complex systems to people. So there's a lot of research going on to try to enable this guideline.
Do we understand how they do what they do? Like, I hear about deep learning and different kinds of machine learning algorithms, and sometimes people say, well, I don't know, like we trained it and this is why, this is what it does. How much insight do we have into the leaps of logic that these systems make, where we could even tell the user why in a way that would be understandable by the layperson?
I think it's depends on the model. Some models are more sort of interpretable than others. Like decision trees, for example, might be more interpretable than deep learning models. So it depends on the models you use. A lot of the AIs we have now are using sort of more complex models and algorithms, and that's what's making it difficult. Really, those models are, you can think of like an AI system or a machine learning model as a combination of data and an algorithm. And so what's resulting in that model is the data that you've trained the algorithm to recognize patterns within. So in that sense, it's often hard to explain why a model is making a prediction. Is it because the data that was trained on was inadequate? Maybe the features that were representing the data is inadequate? Is it something about the algorithm? It's hard to sort of pinpoint why an AI will make a decision that it did. And that there's a lot of research now trying to help people debug AI systems for that reason as well. So I think it's just an open problem. I think people are trying to get there, but we're just not there yet.
Yeah. And if you want to abide by these guidelines and follow them, there's other ones, farther into the paper here, like convey the consequences of user actions. I may or may not be able to really effectively do that if I'm not 100% sure how my system works, because I don't know what the checkbox that you just checked or the button you just pressed is going to do in the future.
Yes, so that one really bugs me. As someone who's sort of familiar with like AI systems, I don't really trust like that they will learn what I want. So I don't provide a lot of ratings on my, in Netflix or Pandora. I'm hesitant to, give thumbs up or thumbs down in those scenarios because I'm not sure what it's going to learn from
Hmm.
me.
Right.
And so it's partly because, yeah, I'm not sure what the model is, what features is it monitoring, what signals is it monitoring, like what is going to happen to the model, what are my new recommendations going to be if I like this versus if I not like this. And so
Hmm.
giving people some insight into the consequences of their actions could help me in that sense.
That's a challenging one because one of your guidelines is learn from user behavior,
Mhm.
right? But then you get into things like one of the controversies around Netflix right now is they've been auto generating the titles, like the what do you call it, like the videotape boxes, right? The little thumbnails that say this is a show,
Uh-huh.
and they're putting different faces on the things to see if you click on them. And
Interesting. Oh, yes.
you see where this is going, right?
I think
So
I've heard of
one of
this.
the things that happened recently is they've been putting a number of Black folks on Twitter felt upset because they saw a new show that they'd never heard of
Mhm.
with a Black person on the front, and they click on it, and that person has a secondary or maybe even just a single scene, and it feels like you've been like told that your favorite character actor is in a show, but they're really not. They're like in one scene in one episode of the show. And it's because, oh, we have learned that you like watching shows with Black stars. Therefore, there's a Black person in this. So we'll dig them up out of IMDb, auto generate a title screen, and then you'll click on it and watch that show.
Right. Yes. So I think learning you have to you have to implement these guidelines very carefully and think about
Mm-hmm.
your specific scenario. I think learning the guideline 13, learning from user behavior, often goes hand in hand with number 15, which is what we call encouraging granular feedback, which is
Mm-hmm.
basically saying allow the user to steer the AI. So if you're going to learn, still allow the user to steer it in the right direction, so that they can have more control about what the behaviors of the AI system. And that
Mm-hmm.
also gets me to another thing I'd want to emphasize is that the guidelines aren't a checklist. Like then they're not all going to apply to every scenario, and so you're going to have to make trade-offs if you're going to implement them,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very scenario dependent. So really, we want people to look at the guidelines, and think about them intentionally, and make decisions about whether or not to apply them in any given scenario.
Yeah, it's definitely not a checklist because even in thinking of this Netflix one, we're going, well, but then make it clear why the system did what it did. But I also want to remember recent interactions,
Mhm.
mitigate social biases, and you're going to find yourself going around and around. But it certainly inspires discussion, and it's a great place to start if you're building any kind of an interaction system using AI.
Exactly. And that we're really interested in that going forwards. How can the guidelines be used at, the initially when you're starting to build an AI product? Can it
Mm-hmm.
encourage design teams and modeling teams to come together and discuss how they should design AI systems and what their AI should support? Can it facilitate that discussion so you can sort of avoid some common pitfalls and create intuitive experiences?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I've been talking with Dr. Saleema Amershi. She's a researcher in the Adaptive Systems and Interaction Group at Microsoft Research. And this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.